Welcome back to the SaaS Jobs Podcast. I'm your host, Will Steward. Today we're talking about AI in recruitment. It's one of the most talked about topics in SaaS, but also one of the most misunderstood. Some teams are automating everything. Others are avoiding AI entirely. Most are somewhere in the middle, unsure where it genuinely helps and where it creates more problems than it solves. To unpack this properly, I'm joined by Omar Zafar. Omar is the co-founder of TalentLynk, a SaaS platform helping recruitment agencies centralise communications and automate admin using AI. He's also worked across recruitment, SaaS sales, and embedded talent models, so he's seen this problem from multiple angles. Omar, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Yeah, great to have you. So Omar, AI recruitment feels like one of those areas where everyone has an opinion. From your perspective, why has it become such a controversial topic?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic, one that's widely talked about a lot now. I think really at the core, recruitment kind of has, it kind of sits in an intersection, right, of like people, money and trust. So I guess like AI kind of works best on sort of repeatable systems, maybe, other things other than maybe hiring decisions, because like those feel quite deeply human. So, when people hear AI in recruitment, I think they imagine robots sort of replacing judgment, not software removing admin. So I think that kind of like emotional reaction creates maybe a bit of like polarization before even talking about sort of any use case.
Yeah, so the robots are taking over and not going to be talking to humans anymore, and robots doing interviews and things.
Yeah, everyone starts thinking of, the Terminator, basically.
So I guess, so when you talk to recruiters or founders, what do they usually think AI is going to fix for them?
I think most of them think that, magically maybe sort of fills jobs faster, and most kind of AI will sort of make everything sort of faster. So I think like sourcing better candidates, writing better messages, or like closing deals. I think in reality, AI doesn't really fix like bad processes. So it just kind of accelerates what already exists, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where do you see the biggest gap between people's expectations for AI and the current reality?
I think people expect AI to almost like replace thinking, when really its real value is probably removing friction. So I think the biggest wins come from like clearing admin, sort of manual tasks, or not really automating relationships. That's probably I think where I think expectations and reality kind of lie.
So I guess it's getting people spending more time on the parts where humans can add value, rather than being bogged down updating spreadsheets or sales in a CRM, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, literally anything that's manual, repetitive, I think that really needs to be sort of automated as much as possible with AI. But then when it comes to anything sort of relationship building, is probably something more sort of human touch is needed.
Yeah. So let's get a bit more specific. In your experience, which parts of the recruitment workflow benefit most from AI automation?
Yeah, I think just following on from, I guess, anything that's kind of like admin heavy, or I guess like low judgment type of work. So things like call summaries, classic thing that a lot of tools are doing right now, whether you're trying to summarize notes about a Teams call you had or a phone call, updating the CRM, or I guess like your ATS is like a big thing. So, typically even just after any kind of conversation, making sure that that's actually put in a system of record. I think after that, probably things like follow-ups. So often just trying to, create drafts of things to follow up on. Scheduling is obviously quite good as well. So, you don't miss tasks or things that you were meant to do. So following up with those like 3 CVs on, next Monday, just sort of scheduling that in, or sort of chasing someone up is really great. And yeah, just logging any type of conversations with candidates or clients. I think that's kind of where AI really shines. So not in deciding who gets hired, so to speak.
Yeah, so I guess you focused a lot on admin and communication. Why would you say that's where the biggest opportunity is?
Because that's probably where recruiters quietly lose hours every day. So I think, we kind of did a lot of research ourselves, and we found, most recruiters probably spend at least like 1 to 2 hours every day on sort of manual tasks. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to mean like call notes. It could mean creating a job advert, It could mean, writing sort of answers to screening questions into the CRM. It could be pretty much anything. I guess the irony is that the more successful a recruiter is, the worse the admin becomes. So I think that's kind of the premise of why we kind of created TalentLynk, because it exists because communication's at the heart of recruitment, but also kind of the biggest operational mess.
Yeah, I guess what would you say changes when recruiters get that admin time back? So how does it affect the candidate and client relationships?
Yeah, I think more than just getting time back, I guess relationships can improve. So, candidates feel remembered. I guess like clients will feel more informed. Recruiters stop reacting and start really sort of managing pipelines properly. So it's not really about doing more, it's more about doing the right work again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So are there any sort of AI use cases that in recruitment that surprised you in terms of how effective they are?
Well, I think the evolution of like AI, I mean, like there's things like AI voice, which is feeding into, I guess, like conversation intelligence. So, not scoring candidates, but almost sort of capturing knowledge. So like context, nuance, intent, that used to live only in like someone's head. And I guess now that's kind of like put into not only obviously any kind of AI model and tool that you're using, but then also back into the CRM and system of record that you might also use. So yeah, that level of kind of intelligence and data is really key.
Yeah. So I guess let's flip it a bit. Where do you see AI being overused or misused in recruitment?
So this one was a bit of a tough one, I guess, because there's so many AI tools as well. But I mean, the one that I see a lot of the time is probably outbound messaging and candidate engagement. So people are automating almost like empathy. And I think like candidates can like sort of, smell that a mile off a lot of the time if it's kind of automated and they're just pretending to be sort of empathetic ahead of the time, and sort of that outbound messaging and candidate engagement isn't sort of as real, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes getting rid of the dashes isn't enough.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what happens when teams automate too much of the candidate experience?
I think the fear, and I guess also the reality of automating too much, is the process becomes efficient, obviously, but hollow, I guess. So the response rates can sometimes drop. I mean, I've seen this a little bit even with using tools like Apollo. I use for our BD. They have like a whole range of automations and kind of AI features as well. I feel like the more that I was trying to automate and sort of like sort of make quicker, I felt like the response rates kind of dropped. So maybe it's because the trust erodes, or they can tell that I'm using AI to generate drafts or something. The classic, like, you can see too many hyphens in sort of written text or something, which is classic from like a chat GPT. So if you optimize for sort of volume, I think you kind of quietly destroy reputation in a way when you do that too. So it's a very strict balance, I think, that needs to be created.
Yeah, have you seen any examples in recruitment where the recruiters adopting AI have hurt trust, engagement, or outcomes?
Yeah, I think especially like auto-generated outreach pretending to be like personal. I think like there was like some cases of like candidates like really sort of disengaging or sort of losing confidence, and sort of recruiters are having to do sort of damage control. So I think like just speaking to like one user actually as well, they have like a built-in AI assistant which can kind of like draft replies for them, and I think they basically tried to create like a candidate rejection email without giving it any kind of like context or anything, using the AI assistant. And I think basically the candidate could tell it was like just automated, and sort of kind of came back being like, some like personal feedback would have been better rather than just this. So I think in that sense that damage control is having to be managed, which has caused even more time being sort of wasted as opposed to it being saved.
Yeah, so I guess why would you say people-driven industries like recruitment hit limits of automation faster than other industries?
I think maybe because like the decisions aren't really like binary. I guess like cultural fit, motivation, timing, those aren't really like data points. They're like conversations that are like forever moving. So I think they're almost like goalposts that are always moving. Someone having like a good week could then just next week have like a really bad week with their manager. Suddenly they're ready to move jobs. You can't really pluck that, right, from sort of data. It's just sort of like a moving goalpost, as I said.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so recruitment's fundamentally relationship driven. So how should founders and recruiters think about balancing AI with human judgment?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one quite a lot, actually. So I think I guess like if you let AI handle sort of memory and mechanics, then humans can handle sort of the meaning and decisions behind what they do. So if AI is speaking for your recruiters, I think you've gone a bit too far probably with it, because that's essentially what kind of makes them unique in that sense. So I think that's kind of how they should probably balance it.
I guess that ties into my next question of sort of what should never be automated. Like, are there sort of specific parts of the recruitment journey that you think just should always be human?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to that last thing that I said around candidate rejection, those conversations should just never be automated. I think especially if like, they've gone deep into the interview process, you've maybe even met up with them sort of personally, like, just take the time to have like a real conversation, provide like as valuable feedback as you can. And then I think when we look at the entire funnel of like recruitment, I'd say probably, I mean, it's really obvious one, but like, towards the end in terms of like offer negotiations and like closing that deal, that'll very hard to see how you can sort of automate that. And I guess anything that's sort of like trust building moments, those require again like a lot of like judgment, empathy. So, those are the things I probably wouldn't automate.
Yeah. So do you think AI changes what good recruiter behaviour looks like, or does it just amplify people's existing habits?
I guess like the way that candidates sort of react for like misplaced sort of AI, they disengage quietly, so they don't really complain. They just start replying as such as well.
Yeah. And so one problem you're solving is fragmented conversations and data living with individuals instead of the business. Why is that such a big issue?
I guess because recruitment businesses don't own their relationships like individual recruiters do. I've heard so many times there's basically like an agency, but kind of everyone just operates as their own little tiny business on their desk. So I guess when someone leaves, like the context kind of leaves with them, if that makes sense. I think that's why like kind of owning that data and I guess almost like the IP is so important.
Yeah, I guess just sort of building institutional knowledge within your system.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, if you take like just a random example, kind of, let's say you spoke to someone, even if it was like a year ago or 6 months ago, they said that they were looking for a 100K job in Manchester. If that doesn't really kind of get noted down anywhere, especially within the CRM, tags created, it's searchable, it's kind of just lost in the ether. I mean, if it is sort of documented, then that one bit of information essentially can be a new search that someone does a year later, finds that person, kind of engages with them, and suddenly that could turn into like a 15K, 20K fee. So that fragmented data is such a big problem because the loss of revenue is so high off the back of it.
Yeah, so we've touched on it a bit, but what risks do you think companies take when recruitment data lives in WhatsApp, personal phones, or siloed tools?
Yeah, I'm just building on that. I think it's first of all, it's just like a compliance risk. And I think secondly, I guess there's like sort of lost institutional knowledge there that I've just kind of mentioned historically that obviously needs to be documented. But more often than not, there's just like that lack of visibility for leadership as well. So, how can I know someone is really meeting KPIs or doing the volume of work if all of their WhatsApp conversations or even some phone calls, for example, are on like another device that I can't actually see or kind of understand what volume they're doing on those. I think clients are almost kind of like tied to individuals and not the firm. So I think that's what kind of the risk is of having those kind of like siloed tools or channels like you mentioned.
Yeah, so it's knowing the performance of your recruiters as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, if you've got like a graduate recruiters come on and, they're doing all the right things, they're talking to the right people, doing the right number of calls and messages and so forth, the only way you're going to see that is if you can get data on it, right? So then you can give them another month or two and maybe they'll come round and become one of your biggest billers. But without kind of having that data, it's really, really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what should founders and agency leaders be thinking about here that they often overlook?
I think a lot of leaders buy AI features before sort of fixing data foundations. So that's like installing autopilot kind of like on a car with no steering wheel, in a sense. So, if they aren't able to clean the data, provide like a basis for a lot of the language models that are going to pull from it, then it's kind of like redundant in a way. So I think the data foundations are key prior to then sort of like building AI on top.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, AI exposes bad data quite quickly. You're only as good as your data in the end.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we're actually building something that is kind of like coaching and I guess sort of L&D tool. Can't say too much about it right now, but essentially it's very dependent on the data that it receives in order to deliver the outputs that a lot of our customers would want. So yeah, the foundations of that are so important.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So if a recruitment agency or SaaS company wants to introduce AI responsibly, where would you say they should start?
I guess probably the best place to start is maybe with some like audits of like processes within the business related to time. So I think like, identify like what drains a lot of like your consultants, but adds like sort of zero strategic value. So like automate that first, and then kind of like build on that, right? So if there's a way of kind of if I could almost think of like a ROI calculator, it would be to kind of break down what's happening across the entire life cycle of like a deal or, sort of with a candidate or a client, breaking that across and then really kind of identifying what they're working on. There's this one startup actually that does this like so well. I say startup, they've been acquired actually by Access now. It's a company called Harara, and their founder, Tom, basically always spoke to us about how he was basically a consultant and he understood kind of that life cycle of like kind of a deal and what a consultant would spend a lot of time on at a executive search firm, recruitment agencies. And he constantly kept seeing like that they spent sometimes like an hour, like a day or like longer editing CVs, for example. So like as a time audit, that was just like crazy to them because they were like, so out of like, 8 to 10 hours in like a day, they're spending like a lot of it just editing CVs. And that's kind of the premise of, why they actually started Harara, because they just wanted to solve that one sort of time saving because they felt like it was pretty huge.
Yeah. So what would you say the early signals are that AI adoption is going well rather than causing friction?
Well, definitely recruiters start complaining less about admin. That's probably the first early sign. Going back to that sort of data point, I think the CRM data kind of like improves without kind of enforcement. And then just if you can see more conversations happening, sort of with fewer tools, I think that's another great sign.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of getting the most out of AI, how do you think teams should involve recruiters themselves in AI adoption rather than just sort of forcing new tools onto them?
Yeah, I've been in this position because I started my career at an agency as well, and I think the best advice for that would be to kind of like build with them and not for them. So if it saves time on day one, adoption kind of sort of takes care of itself. And if you can just understand their daily kind of workflows a bit more to see like what the biggest time savers will be, then that's involving them enough to understand what probably best for the business across the board.
Yeah. So finally, what mistakes do you see most often when companies rush AI into their recruitment stack?
I think buying shiny sort of like AI without sort of fixing workflows. So, and I guess forcing tools instead of solving problems. Those are probably some of like the most sort of common mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess so. nothing really works until you've got the processes sorted out already and you know what you're automating.
Exactly. Yeah. No, because every agency kind of works differently. They're all working on different specialisms. Some are executive search firms instead of agencies. So yeah, really kind of understanding your own workflows is paramount, I guess. But without sort of diving headfirst into the first AI tools that you can see.
Yeah. And to wrap up then, just some rapid fire questions, so quick answers. What would you say the most overrated AI use case is in recruitment?
Probably AI candidate scoring.
The most underrated?
Conversation capture and summarising.
And the biggest red flag when a company talks about AI first recruitment?
When relationships are mentioned last.
Yeah. One task every recruiter should automate immediately?
CRM updates after calls, Teams calls or phone calls.
One task no recruiter should ever automate?
Any type of human conversation that involves judgment or emotion.
And finally, one piece of advice for founders evaluating AI recruitment tools.
Advice would be just think about what problem are you actually removing for the recruiters. That would be the best piece of advice in the first instance.
Awesome. Yeah, so thanks, Omar. This has been a really grounded and practical conversation. So AI clearly has a role to play in recruitment, but it's not a silver bullet, and how teams use it matters just as much as whether they use it at all. If people want to learn more about TalentLynk, see how you're approaching AI in recruitment, or get in touch with you directly, where should they go?
If people want to see how we're approaching AI or in a more practical and recruiter-first way, head to www.talentlynk.ai. We focus on centralising communication, removing admin, and letting recruiters spend more time actually recruiting. You can also connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. And for anyone listening, if you're hiring or looking for your next role in SaaS, check out the SaaSjobs.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.